Development Corporation to order, and if you would please call the roll.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Here.
Alderwoman Sims? Absent. Alderman Plufka? Here. Alderman Gould?
Here.
Tony Ponder? Here. Andy Burkemper?
Here.
Keith Ravenberg?
Great, thank you very much. I would like to bring our attention to the agenda for tonight's meeting and ask for if there's any amendments to the agenda, and if there are no amendments, for approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
There's been a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Likewise, with the minutes, I would take a motion to amend or approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. So new business is the review of a request for proposals for the Manchester Road Corridor Development Area. And I would like to see. I think what we'd like to do is have a general
Recording in
update
progress.
and synopsis. We're being recorded for the community. But to go ahead and have a synopsis of kind of where we are overall with the process, we're looking at the Manchester redevelopment area, and if the staff would be so kind as to maybe take this over, and then we'll get into later presentation by Green Street.
Whitney, turn your microphone on. Sorry about that. Whitney Kelly on behalf of the City of Brentwood. As you recall, the RFP was the third component in the total redevelopment of all of the area south of Manchester Road. With the flood mitigation significantly underway and MoDOT beginning their streetscape improvement along Manchester, the RFP was issued to approve those projects that directly front, to seek for a developer to help with the redevelopment of the properties that front along Manchester Road. The initial RFP was issued on September 1st in 2020. However, we didn't get much response. The feedback that John B. Has provided was that it was the start of COVID. Nobody knew how that was going to play out. And the process to just the cost commitment to issue it to submit for the RFP was very significant. So the RFP was revised and reissued in November to separate those two sections out so that we would get an initial proposal from the developers and then have them refine it for the final, and that's where we are tonight. So the Green Street is the first proposal that we've received and the only proposal to date. So we ask that you listen to their concepts for the whole area and provide feedback. And should you find it satisfactory, we would have them refine it. We're seeking a motion for you to have them refine it and present a final presentation before you. This is just the first step. There's no decision that is binding by this committee at this time. It would just be to have them refine their proposal and represent it for ultimate approval at the Board of Aldermen. As the projects get underway and the development occurs, it would still be reviewed at the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Aldermen at that time as well. So, John, would you like to fill in?
Well, I think the most important thing here is that it's been quite a process to get this to happen, and Whitney mentioned the sort of bumps along the way that slowed this down. I think that what you have in front of you is a proposal that comes very close to representing the vision of the concept development plan that you all, in essence, created, along with the committee that was established. Some of you were on that committee, and I was somewhat surprised to see that what Green Street has submitted is very parallel to most of that concept. Your role as this project goes forward, as Whitney said, is ongoing to a point. The idea here was that when this group was created and as a part of this process, the hope was that you could find a master developer that in effect would take over the process once you had approved a project development and there was a redevelopment agreement between the developer and the city. And so your role to review the concept, to ask any questions, make suggestions, tell the Board of Aldermen that you like the development concepts they're proposing, if you do, or if you do but with caveats or requests, whatever that message is that you want to send forward. And then the second step in this process when this RFP was revised was, as Whitney pointed out, to sort of separate so that a developer could give you their idea and how they would approach the project and the general parameters, the cost that might be envisioned, so on and so forth. And then part two costs them a lot more money because it's in much greater detail, and consequently, the step that we're at tonight is step number one. So while you are approving, if you so desire, the submission and the concept of the project, you'll have another much more detailed bite at the apple, as they say, when the next part of this is actually submitted. As Whitney pointed out, this is only the beginning of the process, and I think it's terrific that you've got something now that makes sense and you can start to work on seriously.
Great, thank you both very much. And I'm glad that you both mentioned something, and for the members of the public that are here, we've done things like this in the past as a community. We very much have had a lot of community involvement throughout the process, throughout the plans that we've already come up with the area. There's been a huge amount of community involvement, and it's also been reflected in the comprehensive plan and all of that too. So as I'm glad you both mentioned, this is the very first step in the process. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for public input. We are very excited, at least I can speak for myself, about all the time that we've put in and having a quality proposal before us for us to spend some time with. So as you had indicated, the idea that we would hit some of the high points and things that the board has questions about or potential concerns about, or things that we know we need to kind of look out for going forward, then we would have the next step, presuming this board agreed that they wanted to continue on with this proposal, would be, as they said, to have a more detailed proposal. The more thorough in some ways that us as a board can be tonight in giving some initial feedback to the developer will make them be more successful at being able to meet the desires of the city, and also saving them a lot of time and energy, I think, too. So it's very much a partnership in trying to meet all of these needs, and I think that later on there will be some opportunity for public comment and questions. And we'll direct those to the chair, and we'll do our best to answer what we can now, but understanding that there's many, many more steps to come and more details will come later. We don't have all the details tonight. So I think with that said, unless Whitney, if you have anything else to add?
No, ma'am. That
Okay.
sounds-
Okay, great. I think we'll go ahead then, well, let me ask first on the general question. Do the board members have any questions before we have Green Street do their presentation? Okay. Well, without further ado, the next item is presentation by Green State Real Estate Ventures on the Manchester Road Corridor Development Area Request for Proposal. And we look forward to hearing from you and meeting your team. I know you've brought everyone here. It's very exciting. We really appreciate it. Awesome. And I should say, we also are recording, as I mentioned, but it looks like we have at least maybe one person that's joined us on Zoom. Is that correct?
Well, yeah,
7 participants. Okay,
members, attendees, and Craig Schluter's on.
okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'm Phil Heltz with Green Street Development. I'm the founder, and I'm fortunate enough to have some really key people here this evening that have helped us in our success. We're honored to be here for a lot of reasons. I think your city represents a lot of the good things you like to see in the community in terms of economic development, diversity, and I love, I live nearby here, but I ride my bike through the community a lot. And it's fun to go by Brentwood schools to see the activity, the enthusiasm, the young families, and the energy. And it speaks volumes to your leadership. And I think taking on the challenge of Manchester Road, that's had a lot of issues over the years and has been really kind of a mishmash of lots of things going on there. And it's a great opportunity to redirect what that looks like, how it fits back into the greater Brentwood, and how it complements what you've done already. And I think in many ways you've been able to use your resources proactively, which doesn't happen very often, and been very thoughtful about how you go from a challenge to creating something of great value. And I think there are things that I look at. We've been in the urban setting for 20 plus years, and we've worked with a lot of development agencies, from St. Louis Development, WashU Redevelopment, Park Central, St. Louis University, and part of the beauty of working with groups is really collaborating, working together, sharing ideas, and interacting, and being open and honest about what the challenges are and how to meet those. So I think just listening to the brief bit of how you've done this on the front end, it feels good. Many times you start off on the wrong foot, and it's hard to redirect that sail to get it on course. But I think, you've got all the great fundamentals here, and to take on the massive task of changing the civil engineering to make this work is really a big step, and it's of scale. So one of the keys to success is having something big enough where you can transform things. So I look at it, to have 30, 35 acres is a big bonus, because then you can integrate the workplace, the place that you live in many different ways, and the entertainment and kind of the amenities that make life interactive. And if you can add greenways, then you've added another dimension that allow people to connect with each other, connect with other neighborhoods, and create kind of an economic engine of why people want to come there. You don't think of greenways as being that dynamic, but if you go to the Atlanta, the Beltline, things like that, you'll see how dramatic you can change what has happened here in the greenways. So I think, you got a great opportunity, and what we bring to the table is 20 years of experience developing millions of square feet, working in urban settings where you have to assemble ground, deal with environmental issues, street vacations, zoning, really dealing with a lot of security issues when you're in an urban environment. So we're used to all that. So I think we are here to help you in a big way with our experience, and we love what you're doing, and we think we've tested the market a little bit, and I'll get into it here. Joel will get into it too. What you'll see in our plan is that we're going to integrate a lot of jobs into the neighborhood that aren't here. We'll create amenities like hotel, residential, both workforce and market rate. I see also entertainment, which is a big component, because you want a place that people want to come to and have a richness, so they don't have to go somewhere else to be entertained. And we've done a lot of things that you'll see here as I go through it that will speak to that. But I think at the end of the day, you want to create some wonderful chemistry that everybody wants to embrace and say, I want to come back here, I want to be a part of it. And you've got a lot of that foundation in place. So, When I started Green Street in 2008, it was during the downturn, when the financial world unraveled. And I think part of what we've done is every one of those incidents, even COVID here that we've gone through, it's taught us a lot about how to navigate and create much more depth to what we're doing. And it comes through people. The people that we have here tonight are just a small sampling. Joel will be speaking here a little later about workforce housing and a lot of the components that we're creating. My partner, Kevin, has been in the real estate business world for decades, so he brings the real world, and we're all very good at what we do, and we collaborate. I got Gerard Hollins, who is an expert at public policy and how to deal with complex financing, capital strategies, incentives. Toby Martin, who has a rich history, his family in real estate, both commercially throughout the region, but really up throughout the Midwest. Amanda Auer, who was with Steve Smith of Lawrence Group, who's done some fabulous projects in our city, you know, in the Arts District, City Foundry, and a lot of the residential that has occurred. So we bring a lot of perspective. And Liz, who is our good spirit, who helps us market, is just, this is just a piece of what we are. We're about 85 people in total, and we're fully integrated with development skills, design, architecture, interior design, building group, and, you know, a whole host of avenues to approach a deal to bring value to you and the community. David Kim. David Kim. Oh my gosh, I did that on purpose, I think, subconsciously. Well, David has been a long-time stalwart in the architectural world. He was with Christner for many years. He joined HDA and is now the leading manager of our organization, and he's so integral to our interface with you and our design team, our construction team, to manage the whole process. And Jack Holleran, who is the founder, and we're also involved with Chip Crawford, who has been a big integral part of the Greenway that's being built throughout the downtown area. And he's a gem of a guy, and he'll bring a lot of expertise in creating public spaces, how we integrate our development into that Greenway, and also the light rail system. Paul Giacoletto, who's not here, is an expert at urban development. He did Ballpark Village downtown, did a lot of the historic rehabs along Washington Avenue, but has developed all over the country in a lot of different realms of residential, commercial, hotels, office buildings, and I've known him for almost 40 years. He was a partner at Clayco. He was one of the lead construction managers at Perrick, and then he joined us here a few years ago. And to complement Gerard, we have Matt Drenin, who is a masterful integrator of public incentives, new market tax credits, but a whole host of economic development tools that'll help us sort out some of the details. And then probably the biggest thing we've done to kind of round out our team is Jake Miller, Brick and Bev. He ran Cordish Entertainment, so Ballpark Village, Power and Light, Texas Live, Harbor Place. So we bring that element of entertainment. How do you run it? How do you keep the enthusiasm, the excitement, and how do we create things that aren't here that are fun and make it a rich amenity in terms of what we create? So a lot of different companies that we've rolled into one, but it's how we really integrate success into what we do, is having all these talents, having all these people at the table with you to help sort through what's the right process. And I think part of this is the fun of doing that collectively together to come up with something that is meaningful and transformational for you, the city, and creates a big economic base to complement what you've done so far. So we've done literally all kinds of projects. These are some of the images. Chroma, which is at the top, is a residential that was in the Grove. It's the first large-scale residential development, rich in amenities, but it attracted high-quality tenants. They're in the Cortex redevelopment area, medical system, and a lot of young professional. But, you know, we really focus on creating communities that are diverse and different, and that is a good example. And then we've really focused, too, on sustainability. We've done some of the highest LEED certified buildings and environments for people to thrive and how they create business platforms. We've done it for sheet metal workers, for office users, lab users. Urban Chestnut was the first green brewery built in Missouri. And where we use sustainability in not only the building, but in the operation. So those are some of the facets that we will bring. Electric car charging. Those are all elements that we want to integrate into what we're trying to help you with. So a few more examples. Who doesn't like to have a beer every once in a while? So we've been excited about being able to create venues that attract people from all walks of life, that are comfortable in coming in with their family, their friends, or having an event. Urban Chestnut's certainly one of those. Rockwell, we did recently Olive and Oak in Webster. That is a good example how you take a historic building and turn it into something that's a gathering place, a wonderful restaurant, a microbrew, and where you can have a celebration, whether it's a wedding, special event, or corporate event, and how that dynamically changes the excitement of coming to a place over and over again. And part of it is that the world is changing, and people are looking for a much richer experience, and that's kind of what we hope to create here, is something on every level, whether it's an office building, a residential, or a play environment, whether it's a microbrew or pickleball or entertainment of sports. We want to have that something that you walk away with a memorable experience. And, you know, we're committed to the communities we work on. We don't do just one project. We're literally doing, you know, 75 acres in Midtown, which is how you change an environment around wonderful assets like the medical centers or Cortex. All those historic neighborhoods are really being revitalized with a wealth of talent, and that's the same thing you see here. I see a lot of youth that want to live in this central corridor that are challenged by having the right living environment or the right economics, so we're here to help you on that as well. And here are some other examples, but we're really focused on the full experience, creating places that people can enjoy every aspect of the day, and we create welcoming experiences, you know, when somebody comes into our projects and how they feel and how they feel about being there and calling it part of their, what they call home. So the other big thing that we're very capable of doing is taking isolated sites that haven't been productive and turning them into engines of opportunity and economic development. This is at the Armory District, which is along I-64 between Grand and Vandemeter. We'll be doing mid-rise residential. We'll turn the Armory into an entertainment venue for music, sports, special events, tennis hall of fame. And then we're taking the famous bar warehouse and kind of complementing it with other entertainment, residential workforce housing, and new venues that are not in St. Louis that create lots of new excitement and a big draw into the neighborhood. So none of these deals are easy. We have a lot of experience, and we're here to roll up our sleeves, and once again, we're honored to be here to see if we can be a good fit for you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel, and you know, the Brick Line is, we are personally very involved. I'm on the advisory board with Great Rivers Greenaway on the Brick Line, but it's kind of that magic thing that's happening here in St. Louis that you see on the Grants Trail or any of the trail system that you've got that is going up towards Hanley Industrial. Those are all great assets that can be enhanced with what you're doing along the Manchester corridor and linking into the Metrolink, and how that can really play a big role in bringing people here as well. Joel, who's really the mastermind of what we're creating here in many, many ways, along with our whole team.
Thank you.
That can be scary. Thanks, Phil. Hi, I'm Joel Oliver. I'm the Managing Director of Development at Green Street, and thrilled to be working on a project of this scale 5 minutes from my house instead of a different part of the country. It's wonderful having good things happening in St. Louis. I mean, it's really exciting. You know, I think that we get excited when we see communities that are really proactive in trying to reshape big areas, you know, because it helps you control your destiny. And I think that two really important factors play in as you're considering, you know, who's the right group. I think you know, we hear a lot of people say a lot of things, and it's hard sometimes to kind of suss through what's reality. I think Phil did a great job kind of demonstrating Green Street as an organization has all the capabilities in-house to do the pieces that we need, to utilize resources outside of our shop like CHIP when it's necessary, and to be able to take on projects of this scale. What I see often as we talk to cities with projects like this, and you have developers that are really good at one thing, whether that be they develop shopping centers or hospitals or apartment buildings or hotels, whatever those things are, and those are great. But when you have something of this scale, that can be kind of scary, you know, if you don't have somebody who can trust to come in and be able to put their arms around the entire thing. And that's one way that we've really differentiated ourselves. You know, here in town, the Armory District at 21 acres is a great example. We also have a site in Madison, Wisconsin that's 65 acres. We're redeveloping the entire district. A 40-acre site in Boise, Idaho that we're working on. So I think it's important for you to know that the way we approach projects is not reactionary. You know, when we say no to a lot more deals than we say yes to, because the worst thing we can do is take on something and be a disappointment. So we're thrilled to be here, and we're really excited to share with you. Everything in this presentation tonight, it's formatted differently, but it's the same information that's in your books that you all have. So I'll go through some of it kind of quickly, so please stop me if there's something else to focus on, and we'll do that. As Phil mentioned, several of us have backgrounds in the tax credit subsidy world, whether that be the low-income housing tax credit world, new market tax credits, renewable, historics, understanding how to utilize those resources we have to provide things other than just the most expensive luxury product that you could maybe do somewhere. So 3 years ago, we sat down and realized, you know, reshaping these urban assets that communities have, usually in downtown central core areas that are underutilized, aren't really good for a community. And Phil took it upon himself. How do we reposition those? How do we make those economic engines? How do we have job growth? How do we pump money back into a community? He was very successful at that. Then the next shoe that fell was, this is really great. There's nowhere for people to live, like, right? You know, when we heard more and more cities saying we're having trouble hiring teachers, firemen, police officers, entry-level folks in a community who, you know, may not be applicable to live in a tax credit subsidized project, but maybe also can't afford a luxury option. So he said, how do we provide this workforce housing thing? Workforce housing is a really fun, catchy word to say at conferences. Lots of people talk about it. Bankers talk about it. I have a master's degree in urban planning. Urban planners love to talk about workforce housing. Guess what? Not many people have figured out how to do it. So here we are 3.5 years later, and we think we've maybe kind of figured it out. But we know it's a crisis on a national scale. So we've done 2 projects that are actually finishing up now, which is really exciting. So our first project is in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Sheboygan, Wisconsin's a super weird town. You know, you have Kohler, the plumbing company's headquartered there, Bemis, Acuity Health, Sargento Cheese, Johnsonville Brat. You have massive industry, and Kohler was busing people 45 minutes every day. They said, we have this huge problem because everybody's only building luxury housing. So we converted a 17-acre site that had been a concrete plant since 1886 in the middle of a residential neighborhood into 240 units of workforce housing. Their version of Quick Trip has a K, not a Q. They only overlap in a little piece of southern Iowa. And then hopefully a medical office building. So the city came to us and said, nobody will touch this. It's really hard. And it's taken 4 years, and here we are, and we're thrilled. Here in St. Louis, we have a project in the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood, so near Urban Chestnut. That was a project that Washington University Medical School had been assembling sites for 25 years. This was the last piece they had. So the 6 buildings you see on the top there are shown on an infill map on the bottom. So we believe that this will be really a textbook example that both St. Louis University and Washington University are having doctorate students look at how this project will impact the neighborhood. Because catty corner to this, we're also doing a luxury housing project. So in this neighborhood, you'll have homes that have been in the community for a long time and are very attainable to purchase. You have brand new housing that's relatively expensive. There's a low-income housing tax credit project that opened a couple years ago, a workforce housing project, and a market rate project. So it's really a community that's accessible to a very wide range of people. Just about anybody could choose to live in this neighborhood. But for the latitude we've been given to do projects like this, nobody would do this. A developer would come in and build very expensive market rate housing all day long, and it would be really successful, and you'd make a lot of money and you'd move on. But we've been given the latitude to how do you impact community? Like, how do you come in and do something that's sustainable and really has long-lasting impacts? Which is why we're here. And we believe we can help that happen in Brentwood. So this is the map that you all saw that is in your book. Can you see that well enough? I could try to zoom it in, but so what I'm going to do while I keep this on the screen is I'm going to tell you what the boxes are, because it's very hard to have both things up at once. So I believe that should be the page in your book right after this map. So on the left side of the screen is Brentwood. On the right side of the screen is Hanley. That's Manchester running side to side. That was a joke. So the way we approached this project was to start with the great work that PGAV had done, and then layer in kind of our current experiences, what we're seeing, best practices based from David's team on the design side, and then just what we're seeing on a national scale. So we are viewing this in theory as 3 phases. So when you look on the top, you'll see A is the little orange kind of triangle piece here that you had denoted as a brewery concept. The first phase goes down to E. So that's the little orange box right here, which maintains the signal that had been shown before. So we're not changing that signaled intersection. So A through E would be phase 1. F through M, which is this little orange building, and this cluster here would be phase 2. And then I and J would be phase 3. We're working that way because of the MSD lateral that's going in along Hanley that you guys are aware of. That's why we're starting left and working right. Everything on the north side of Manchester, we believe, will follow suit. The big blocks are obviously harder to do, and we believe that the smaller pieces will follow along. We're still showing you what we envision those to be, and we believe that'll just kind of march down Manchester as we go. So that first phase of work, we have estimated at approximately $165 million worth of development. That second phase is $100 million. The third phase is $90 million, and everything north of Manchester is $45 million. So in total, we're viewing this as a $400 million investment in our scope of work on top of what you all have already done for the flood mitigation work. The really key pieces that I would call your attention to is we're showing on the south side of Manchester 3 multifamily components that are rental product. That would be K, M, and J. We understand that somebody else may have site control on the north side, and that was previously shown as multifamily where V is. So however that is developed, be it us or somebody else, we're still showing that as a multifamily rental product. We envision one of our 3 on the south side likely being a product that's age restricted to probably a 55+ community. We have partners that we have worked with specifically at this idea, and we believe that that housing type that's being developed in other parts of St. Louis, by and large, painting with a broad brush here, miss everything that this site has to offer. It's walkable, it has the connectivity to the trail, it'll have entertainment options, it'll have retail, restaurant, and service options. So we believe that'll be very successful. L is the other housing option, which is the little kind of brownish boxes here. We would envision those being a for sale condominium product, taking advantage of the views of the park. We do have 2 significant office users that we're in conversations with that are both very excited at the possibility of being in this location, which is what B represents. So that's currently a, I believe, 75,000-foot office building. And next to it, C would be a 175-key hotel. So as you see, these pieces all present synergies that benefit each other and work well together. What we don't want to do is introduce uses that cannibalize other uses that are already in the community, but may offer opportunities for current businesses to relocate, which is one of the biggest advantages of this phasing approach. As you're working with all of the business owners, landowners along Manchester, you can give them the option of, well, your space is going to go away, but how can we facilitate you in this other phase instead of we're tearing your building down tomorrow, go temporarily relocate yourself. So we believe that really provides a good trade-off there for the community. I is very interesting. So Phil talked about our new venture, Brick and Bev, which is really exciting. And we're working with Jake on several concepts all around the country. And each is very tailored to a community. So what we don't want to do is come in and just immediately say, this is the best thing that could possibly go here for a specific use. But that could be something that's akin to an indoor or outdoor concert setting. It could be a pickleball setting. It could be, we're doing a roller skating rink in one community, because that's what we believe will do well there. So we have that I quadrant is destination entertainment that we would develop in-house ourselves, and we'll refine that concept as we move forward, based on your feedback, of course. I can go through all the other little pieces if you want. What would be the easiest for you all?
I think actually that would be great.
To go through each individual piece?
Yeah, and
that's
for the
perfect.
benefit of the public too, and the folks that'll watch this later, because otherwise they won't really know. And they don't.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start at the bottom left corner and just march right down Manchester. So we have A still shown as a brewery concept, which we have had conversations with some of the folks you guys previously were talking to. As Phil said, we've previously developed and constructed 3 microbreweries in St. Louis. So that'd be Urban Chestnut, Rockwell, and then Perennial's location in Webster. So we're very comfortable in that space. B is the office that I mentioned. C is the hotel use. K is the apartment building, but also provides for overflow parking for the park itself. So you have the surface lot that's shown off of Brentwood, obviously. We're providing a secondary option for the park, and then also overflow parking for some of the commercial uses if the surface lot between A and B were to be full. So that has a little bit overparked, but it's because of those other uses. D and G are the 2 pink boxes that are both mixed use kind of commercial space that are 2 stories. So that could be a service or commercial use on the first floor, and it, in theory, could be apartments or office space on the second floor, but those are shown as 2-story buildings. E and F are the orange boxes between D and G, which we're currently showing both as 8,000 square foot restaurants. If I'm not careful, it's a lot of letters. M is also a multifamily building. We're showing that as 220 units in that building. When you see the style of building there, the parking is in the center. So the yellow is the building itself, and then the gray portion in the middle is a parking structure. That could change a little bit depending on how exactly we want to orient it, but the concept is that you don't see the parking, it's screened, it's not huge seas of surface parking lots. I, we discussed, and J, we also discussed. So that is also 220 apartments in J. V, at the scale that you see the multifamily in the corner of Manchester and Hanley, that scale is 100 units of multifamily as is shown right now. And then the pink boxes on the north, so that'd be U, T, S, R, and Q, are all shown as mixed-use commercial also. That's single story, so it's an appropriate scale for the single-family residential that is behind it. I think that hit all of them. This is obviously kind of the big meat of what we're talking about. Do you want me to pause here for a second and see if you have any questions or comments before I go?
Tell us about H.
So H is also our 8,000 square foot restaurant.
So yes, I think pausing for a moment would be great. I do have a question too on K. You talked about the other buildings being wraparound on the building. So what shows on the front of that? Like, does the parking garage show to the front, or?
And so, David, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The reason that it doesn't wrap on that side is to provide that overflow parking access for those other uses.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and even though we haven't, totally gotten it, we're discussing buildings and concepts and everything, but as members of the audience see things like this, they can start to get nervous about what's going to happen to my property, what's going to happen to my house, is somebody going to come in and take it, right? And through this whole process, we've been very clear that that wasn't what we were doing, that wasn't how this was gonna work. And so just to lay any of the fears to rest as far as single-family residential and working with the neighborhoods and things like that, maybe you might want to address just a little of that. Does that sound okay, Joel?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, so the redevelopment footprint that you see with the new construction is all within the redevelopment footprint. So none of it encroaches outside of the defined perimeter that was given to us and does not contemplate taking any single-family homes at all. We don't see a reason, based on any of the kind of massing plans we've done, where that would be necessary or something we would want to do.
Great, thank you. And that's consistent with all of our discussions. I just wanted to be clear before we made anybody nervous when they see the boxes and the big plans, like what the ideas are.
It's better to say it than to assume. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree.
Take care of it right now. I also, before I'll go to Mr. Plufka, Alderman Plufka for questions. I did also want to ask about the restaurant kind of outlots. What, you said 8,000 square foot restaurant. So I know you've tested the marketplace with some things. I know this is super early in the stages, so we're not asking you to tell us like who. Can you give us any general idea of what that might be like? And thinking of the fact that like right now, you know, it's like drive-throughs and fast food, and we want to get a better understanding of what your vision is as far as the types of restaurants and how that would work with your community and your workforce housing.
Absolutely. That's a good question. So nothing that you see on this plan as is programmed as having a drive-through use. The architects would lay it out a little different to allow for that to happen. You know, generally, if you look across the portfolio of what we've done, it's generally working with local, not chain kind of uses. This is a little more sensitive in my opinion because you have a lot of existing businesses that are here. So we want to be sensitive with the community too of kicking users out and not providing options. So that's something that we'd work with the city really on taking the lead on what exactly that looks like. The scale of what these are would represent generally a sit-down restaurant. We have a lot of good relationships with a lot of local restaurateurs, and then the brick and bev concept also has the capacity to manage and run those concepts if they have something different that we hear that we think would work well.
Great, thank you so much. I have more questions, but I'm going to go to Alderman Plufka.
Oh, thank you. I have two questions. First one is, with regard to the multifamily boxes, the rectangles that are south of Manchester Road, was there any thought given to any of those being dedicated towards senior living or some other thing like that? And the reason I say that is Brentwood is a community, I think you're going to find, that prides itself on the fact that a large percentage of its residents are lifelong residents and sometimes multi-generational residents. And it would be nice to be able to offer a senior living option within the 63144 zip code.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think that if you take a community like Brentwood, we live in Webster, so we're very close, so we understand very near and dear to us that issue. We would envision that one of these buildings, assuming that the market size and things we do, which we believe will support that concept, would be in that kind of 55 plus restricted kind of category, which is the designation when people talk about independent living. So, yeah.
So my only other question has to do with workforce.
Yep.
And I'm not that familiar with the requirements of that concept, but is it just, are you only able to qualify through paycheck, or can you qualify through the use of fixed income?
So I didn't tell you the most important part about our workforce platform. So,
Okay.
Sorry, you could have pinched me or something. Yeah. So I'll answer that question. Kind of an inverted pyramid here. So also the multifamily as a whole, we would not envision all being workforce. What we see that happens kind of on a national scale, locally everywhere, is what we end up doing is siloing people in life. It just happens. So, you know, you have the very wealthy community. So this is a very expensive apartment building. This is, you know, somebody that may live in a trailer park community, or somebody who's on fixed income or in a tax credit project. We kind of silo these people. We don't believe that's good. We believe the best thing you can do for a community is give kind of a menu of options, so that if you're a server at a restaurant or you're a new school teacher, you at least have the option of living in your community. It's not to say you will, but if you have the option of doing that, then you can invest all of yourself in your community instead of splitting time between here and there. So I believe the number, do you remember the percentage that we have that we were talking about for workforce? Okay. So 50% and 80%? So the way that works is when you look at the scale of affordability of projects. At one end, you have what people will call Section 8 vouchers. So a Section 8 voucher is something that HUD issues, and that's meant for kind of the most at need in a community that need the most help. And so that person pays 30% of their income to live somewhere, and then HUD makes up the difference. So if somebody has a Section 8 voucher, they can live anywhere. So for instance, Webster just passed an ordinance that you can't discriminate on income. So if you had a Section 8 voucher, you could live in a market rate apartment. So that's one end of the spectrum. Obviously, the other end is luxury living. When you go down that spectrum, you have what people call low-income housing tax credits. So that's different than Section 8. That's the federal government gives developers tax credits to be able to build Class A apartment buildings, and you keep the rent lower because you have this equity that the government's given you. That's usually benchmarked against what is called 60% AMI, which is the area median income. That's derived from the census data. So that's where that comes from. So if you make 60% of the area median income, you can live in a tax credit project. Okay, so go down the line. When we say workforce housing, we benchmark that against 80% of the area median income. So in St. Louis County, that's about what a starting public school teacher makes. So about $45,000-ish a year. So if that was just single person's income, they would be able to live in a workforce housing project. So that's kind of the metric of what we say. Now, whether or not you were on a fixed income or if you had money in the bank, however, you pass that qualification that you can afford to pay your rent, there's different ways our management company measures that. We don't discriminate against that, how that income is derived.
Okay, thank you.
And then that product type and those other two projects I showed you, the workforce units, the market rate units aren't designated what is what. You don't know if your neighbor is in a workforce unit or, because they're the exact same thing. Because they may float, it may be something different. It's not that all of the workforce units are, facing the garage or something like that. They're the same. Does that answer that?
It did. You answered
That was a
my
great
Thank
question.
you.
So, I'm sorry I missed it earlier.
That was great. Thank you. Alderman Leckmiller.
Joel, looking at the apartment units, I mean, in the whole project, you're looking at well over 700 units. Looking at, one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom units. Our population's about 8,000 people. Spread throughout just this little area, you're going to add probably 15, maybe 20% population to Brentwood. You guys feel, with what we see building up in Maplewood and some of the other surrounding areas, that high-end markets for these type of rentals are still going to be?
Yeah, what I would tell you is I would not want to build all of those units at one time and put them into the market at the same moment in time. That would not be great. And I would say any community in St. Louis. So I think the fact that it's phased the way it is, I think makes us feel better. And I think the phasing also gives you a chance to react to the market. So if you build that first apartment building and the market says those units are too big, too small, the unit mix needs to be adjusted, you have the opportunity to do it as you move down the road and make those tweaks. I think that having an age-restricted building will go a long way. I think that that will be incredibly successful. The people that we work with that specialize in that space said that building will be completely pre-leased before you open it. Because the developers that are building that product in other places, it's not what that community wants. They want to be somewhere here where you have access to these amenities, where you have the outdoor spaces. So we believe that will be very successful.
And then regarding the hotel, typically you don't see a hotel this deep into an area, a residential area. They're usually along highways or major corridors. Is this to support the offices in this area, or?
Yeah, so we're actually working on 3 hotels right now. And it's interesting. Hotel development's a very different animal than real estate development in its traditional senses. And we have a fantastic partner that's all they do is hotel development. And they're very bullish on this site. So yes, the office users help, but that's not the underpinnings of it. We just believe that there's a void in this part of town. When my in-laws come in town to visit us in Webster, there are a lot of choices. You're going up by the Galleria, or you're going to Frontenac, or there's Clayton. So we think there's a hole in the middle that could use to be filled.
Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
One of the questions we asked about this is not your normal hotel, in my opinion.
Right.
I don't know, maybe you can explain it better than I can. I've seen the examples all over the country, but you put a hotel here that's unique.
That's right. That's right.
It's not your Red Roof Inn or your, Hampton Inn or whatever.
That's right. It's more, yes, you're exactly right.
Boutique type.
Yeah.
Alderman Gould?
Yeah, I had a bit of a follow-up and some of the same questions, especially as it relates to the area and adding so many units. I do think that I would love to see maybe some additional ideas, maybe seeing some more business opportunity here, or, shared working environment type of thing mixed in here, because if you do roughly calculate that, I mean, adding potentially 1,400 new residents to, wards that are divided out by 2,000 residents total, right? And we have 4 wards. You're making a fifth ward in potential on Manchester Road, and I think in our original plan, we didn't foresee this being development for residential living, but more for, retail and restaurants and entertainment for the community that does live here in the region to come to it. So I do love the idea of age restricted housing. I like what I'm hearing a little bit more now, understanding workforce housing. That's foreign to me a little bit. So I just think I'd love to hear if there was a way to relook at this and reduce it, reduce the number of units. What would that look like?
Yeah, so I think what John B. opened with is really true. So to get to the point we're at today, what we're presenting to you today, we had PGAV's original plan and kind of a we believe we do well and best practice. You're creating an unbelievable asset, what you're doing by fixing the flooding. The park that you're creating is amazing. So programming something that really leverages that is the best asset for a community is where we want to end up. You have a lot of big box retail already. You probably knew that. So we didn't want to show us something like that. We didn't believe that fit well with really kind of maximizing this, having loading docks facing your beautiful park. And also trying to respect your retail that exists. So we believe that, the pink boxes on the north side actually present a lot of opportunities for those uses. I will tell you, since we had the initial conversation with the city, St. Louis is a little big town, and word got out. We've actually had 2 office users that are of a national scale say that they would love to have 75,000-foot office buildings here that would be new to your community. I'm not going to show that on the plan yet because we're pretty preliminary, and I'm not going to build just one spec office building. But to hear that community of business owners say, this is a great community, we would love to locate here and have access to all of these things, I think really kind of makes the plan start to gel together.
So you're open to,
Absolutely.
all the modifications
Absolutely.
of that?
We have to be careful on that tipping point of, you don't want to go out and get people excited and signed up for something when you're not chosen as a developer for something. So,
Absolutely.
As Sherry said, there's a lot of road between now and putting a shovel in the ground, and there'll be continuous feedback from the local community, but also the bigger community on what needs to go here. So,
Thank you. That's great. And the I section that you have is kind of the multi-use entertainment area. I think conceptually it's interesting. It reminds me of an area on 30A called the Hub that was, I don't know if you're familiar
exactly
with
what
it.
it is.
So I think that could be really interesting. Do we have places like that in the region at all, or would this be one kind of a first?
I think it will be, in the form that we're showing it, it'll be something new. So what we're doing at the Armory is not what this will be exactly, right? That could be a venue where you have, several thousand people at a concert. This is not Riverport. So that's not what we're trying to do, right? That would not be good. That will require a little more digging from that group within our company of like really what's missing, what could be really exciting here. And it will be something that draws people to Brentwood in a way that it doesn't now. We have the problem in Webster, like we have some great restaurants. People go and they eat dinner and then they leave. Like there's nothing to do, right? So they are great restaurants, but imagine if you could do that and then also go, somewhere else and play indoor yard games. Or have an outdoor concert. So that will definitely evolve between now and the next meeting of what that actually looks like.
Yeah, and I think placement of that, curious of why it maybe wouldn't be closer tied to the green space. But
I think part of the logic was we don't want to compete because that is an outdoor use also. So having two outdoor uses, doing a conflict, and having that abut the industrial park, they would not complain about if there was, noise or some kind of thing like that. So just trying to be sensitive of those variables.
Good logic. And then I have one more question, and I think I'm going to be done. The parking area that is in K that you talked about potentially being overflow public parking, is that what I'm understanding?
Yep. So that currently shows, let me see if, it's showing 826 stalls in that parking structure, which is a significant amount.
Yeah, and I think that's critical for those of us that have been on the board and talking about the destination that we've been creating here in this flood mitigation zone, the opportunity to make it a destination, especially with the playground. Parking is going to be critical.
We agree.
So anything that we do development-wise, I think as long as it is available to the public for free, I think would be a value. And obviously, we don't just want a big parking structure everywhere. So I think if it's integrated in, that's a good idea.
I believe we are also showing a retail use on the backside of that garage that if you were having, that could also go in the spot that shows potential development, but just south of A, kind of in the big field area that you see there. And that's really getting in the weeds with you all on how you anticipate programming the park. What could you put there to support those? So if you're going to an outdoor concert, your kids could buy a snow cone, or you could sit in an outdoor patio at the brewery and maybe have a beer while you're listening to that. So those are really in the weed things that programmatically we'd look at with you. As far as the parking goes, the mechanism where you actually kind of codify that would be in a final development agreement with the city, where that would be spelled out, where there's X number of parking stalls that have these criteria, these hours, and that's
Okay,
part of the kind of process for that.
great.
Thank you, yes.
I have a few questions. First of all, just for clarification, the K, M, and J, the little gray boxes kind of off to the side, can you just explain what those are?
Those
supposed to
are
represent?
outdoor amenity decks. So the little blue box in the middle of the gray box is a swimming pool,
Okay. All right, that was an easy one. So along
which is totally unclear. So it's a good question.
along the same lines of what we were just saying, so I was wondering if I like the idea of K, that extra parking being sort of multi-use, like it can be overflow for various things. And I was just wondering if maybe that could make more sense, over where M is, just because you've near where you've maybe get a big influx of people for that entertainment venue. But one of the other questions was so for A, well, I guess for any of these, do you have, you mentioned before, you guys do a lot of reusing of existing buildings. I don't know if you may be way early, you haven't evaluated this, but are there any existing buildings that are on the site that are potential, good enough, bones to be reusing, or?
Sure, that's a good question. So it's actually really hard to evaluate at this point because you really need to get an engineer and a construction guy into buildings to evaluate them. And I don't believe we feel like we're at a spot where we want to be talking to property owners at this level and kind of put a cart in front of the horse. But to the extent you're able to reuse, especially significant structures that have a place in a community, I mean, it's something we always evaluate to see if it makes sense. With kind of the topographic changes that are happening with the flood mitigation and kind of how the level grades may change would be part of that, and we'd evaluate it. I actually did ask the Brick and Bev group your parking question for that use down there, because I said the exact same thing you did. Apparently, I'm not a destination entertainment guy. And this is kind of programmatically what they generally put in for their model. So
And then,
I'm gonna say it's a good question since I asked it too. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, David Kim, our architect with HDA. So the other issue with the K multifamily parking garage is that parking garage provides about 95% of the parking for the office building and about 95% of the parking for the hotel. And then it's also overflow parking for the microbrewery in Building A. So that's what makes it a little more programmatic or problematic to slide that parking down to Building M. So it's also the overflow parking for the park, and then obviously if during the day you got office users using the garage in the evenings, and the folks going to the park or on the weekends can use the garage. So it kind of serves multiple
Yeah, we've seen some really interesting shifts in the last decade on how people park. This is actually a very interesting topic. Building parking's really expensive, and the way people drive and park has changed dramatically. So, hotels, for instance, we see less and less people are using cars, which makes sense, right? If you're traveling in somewhere, you maybe just Ubering somewhere. Things like microbreweries we see are using a lot less cars because less people are driving there because they don't want to drink and drive. We're also seeing that just the general public don't like parking in parking garages. If you're just going to a store or a restaurant and you're doing a thing, people generally, for whatever reason, at least here in St. Louis, don't really like that. That creates challenges because building structured parking is very expensive. It's about 4 times as expensive to build a parking spot in a garage than it is on a parking lot. So finding that right balance where you can trade off daytime and nighttime uses is about the most elegant solution we found with trying to program. But we also don't want to make massive seas of parking in your
Right.
really
yeah.
pretty new area.
That's kind of what I was getting at too. Just looking at it, I appreciate the the mention of permeable paving and stuff like that. But just seeing the big gray parking lots, it just.
The other thing that's not represented on this plan, because it's very hard to show a plan of this scale, is we attempt to integrate solar when we're able to. Integrating solar on multifamily particularly is very challenging. We actually had a great call with some attorneys out of Omaha and Minneapolis today to help us figure out how to do it well. And we think we have a strategy for how to start doing that at scale on projects like this. It's not, Green Street's not just a cute marketing thing that Liz made up. I mean, it really is kind of what we do, kind of trying to do things in the most sustainable ways we can.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm on, Brentwood's got a sustainability commission now, and it's certainly something that's a priority for us. That's one thing I would, personally like to see more, more detail on all those kind of,
absolutely.
efforts of what that would, more specifics, I guess, on what those efforts might look like.
Okay.
And then my final question, so can you speak a little bit more? So the north side development, it's not part of the 3 phases you've got laid out. Can you just, I didn't quite follow, I guess, how those, is it still part of what you all would be developing?
Yep.
It's just sort of, it would just kind of come as it goes, or?
Yeah, so what's tricky about, and we could have shown it just as part of those phases, and it felt disingenuous, and the last thing I want to be is come in here and tell you something that I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to execute on yet. The reason it's tricky is doing a big box, like doing an office building or a hotel. Those are like discrete things that are very hard to do, right? So that is a very targeted effort of, okay, in that first phase, we're going to do a microbrewery, an office, a multifamily building, and a hotel, right? We can sit down and do that. But to say, so N is, I don't know how big it is, probably 6,000 square feet. To say, okay, I'm going to find a 6,000 square foot chiropractor, as an example, right? That's different, right? So what we generally see and what we do is you have the kind of natural energy of what's happening here. You will have users that show up, and like the new building that just went in for Navigate's a great example. You have a user that shows up and say, oh, we would love to have a 10,000 square foot building here, and you just kind of work with users to go in along the way. We understood there was a user who wanted to locate in this area that we just heard about that's in that smaller size. That's a great example where you're working with real estate brokers and you're building and developing those as you go. So in an ideal world, yes, your north and south side are tracking as you move down the road.
And one final one, I promise. And so the one thing I would say to some of the alderman's comments about the additional, all that residential, permanent residence, certainly the school district, would want to bring them to the table to weigh in on that as well, just because it could potentially be something that would have to have a big impact on.
Another big sensitivity. I was actually on the Board of Education in Webster, and I've been the president of the foundation for the school district for 6 years. So just on the phone with our superintendent right before I came here. So like working with schools. So absolutely, you're very right.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I have a question about, I've heard from other cities that are creating these destination places that have condo and apartment opportunities, that they're having issues with Airbnbs, that they're basically not long-term residents, but people are filling them with Airbnb. So what would be the solve for that? So we're not having that kind of in and out presence.
You guys have really smart questions. It's great. We actually just talked about this last week.
I think Whitney can address that as far as our
Currently,
regulations.
the city's zoning ordinance does not allow for Airbnbs.
Yep.
So that would not be an option at this location. Yeah.
And we manage our own properties. That's one of the spokes of the wheel, and we actually don't allow for Airbnb, VRBOs, and on the rental side, which we can control. We cannot control it once we've sold you a condominium, but the city ordinance is what would protect you there. What we would view as kind of managing this whole district is we're a partner with the city at that point. So when you hear people having problems like that, you have a local team that's here that owns it and is on the ground, and it's bad for us if people are being bad community members.
And that's something actually that I was going to ask, and I'll get to you just a second, but on the same exact subject, I was going to ask you to give more clarity as far as what your continuing involvement would be in the multifamily buildings, in any of the office buildings, in any of the entertainment, and particularly like if the entertainment's going to be in phase 3, which is down the road, understanding that it has to happen that way because of the flow of them as deconstruction and all of that, but it makes it potentially riskier for the city of like a super exciting amenity that they might want to have of the entertainment being later. So how are you going to stay involved in the project for these different things like that, which you partially already just said, but.
Sure. I think if you start at the high level, our intention would be to be the master developer and to develop everything that's here. You know, we have had other situations where there may be a reason where somebody else comes in and wants to develop a piece of a building. So we're open to that if that's something that makes sense for the city. But our intention would be to develop everything that's here ourselves. You know, kind of the best answer is the proof is in our track record, and you know we're based in St. Louis, and if you look at the pipeline of projects we've done over the past, our intention is to be long-term holders of real estate. There are times where we'll sell an asset because we may have an investor in a project that's what they want to do. But generally our intention is to stay involved on the management side at the very least. And then I think I'm not a lawyer, Amanda, so we could point at her, but I think you could kind of paper that transaction in the development agreement with the city that spells out how the piece of kind of having hooks in with the multiple phases would be. Is that true? There you go. She'll write it up while she's sitting there. So yeah, that's what we would envision.
That's awesome. And that's something I think that we've had in some other situations where we've had developers who were master developers who continued on, and I think that we've had a really good experience with that. So I think that could lend a little bit more comfort level. And did you have any other question before we move on to Keith? Okay.
I would have one more thing to that.
Yes,
what
Joel.
I would say is the timeline that we showed you, so that's this. So this is based on what we know right now. You know, there's a lot of collaboration that goes to really drilling this down. So that's working with the folks doing the current work. It's working with Jacobs really closely. It's having conversations with MoDOT and with the state to really understand at a very granular level kind of how their phasing of work happens. Because this may reflect something that we could actually do faster if we're able to. But kind of the cart and the horse, and putting this together for you didn't really feel it was appropriate to have those conversations at this level. So this is conservative, and if we learn, when we learn more, we can kind of drill that down.
I would say that we definitely appreciate you being conservative and not over-promising and being realistic. So, and that's great that you mentioned the phasing timeframe, because I was going to ask about that too. And since you just mentioned it, would you maybe, for the benefit of the public that isn't really following the slide so well, give a very brief overview of what that development timeline is?
Sure. So we're in the middle of the RFP process now. We believe our understanding of the process is that the city would hopefully be in a position to make a decision possibly in the August-ish area if things went correctly. So assuming that happened and we were chosen to be the developer partner with the city, we would start on the very granular design work at that point. So several of the users, like I mentioned, are in the first phase, are very excited to move quickly. So if we could do those projects with those folks, that would move quickly. So we would look to start the design and permitting process on those very quickly, put the financing in place. So while you have all of these buildings, and lay people terms, you really have to finance each building separately, because they're kind of each their own standalone project. So that obviously makes it a little more complicated when you're dealing with a number of things we're talking about. So that financing process would start at that point. With a project of this scale, we do believe that it is possible to bring in strategic partners that are looking for projects of this size to help on the financing side, but that's part of the process that has to go on. So that would be in the second quarter of next year, we'd finalize that. This shows being under construction in the third quarter of 2023. I believe that's conservative. I believe that in theory could happen faster based on those conversations, like I was saying with Jacobs and with the other stakeholders that are at the table. So if we could accelerate that, we would. The entire project we're showing is about a 4-year time frame. So that puts you in 2026 to be complete.
Great, thank you. And I think that also allows for the community to have a gradual kind of intake and adjustment period as this kind of goes along too. It's not like it all happens tomorrow.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Keith?
Yeah, I guess I got maybe 3 things. School children were mentioned. I'm on the school board. And you said some of this is senior housing, so I assume there's not a lot of kids there. But in this many apartments or this many residences, what would you anticipate being the number of school-age children that would end up living there altogether?
Yeah, no, that's...
Because we are in the process of working out details for renovations of the elementary school that would serve. That's a marked difference. I guess we probably need to know that sooner rather.
Yep. So in the age-restricted housing, there's really 2 definitions when you talk about age-restricted housing, according to HUD. So you can restrict it to people that are 55 and older, which is offensive to people that are 55, or they're 62 and older. So you generally will use one of those criteria. Most developers like ourselves will use that 55-plus rule, because in that, a 55-year-old could have a 50-year-old spouse and you could still live there. And you could have like a grandchild in theory could live with you. And the 62 plus, you can't. So everybody has to be 62 or older. So in theory, somebody that's 55 or older could absolutely have school-age children or a grandchild. You would not see a lot of that. So that's not something that we would anticipate really moving the needle. And then as far as the unit mix that we showed you and the proposal for the other buildings, is what we are generally seeing in the St. Louis County market. And we believe that is a product type that most people want. Between now and what we actually build, you get much, much deeper and kind of working through market studies of what's really missing, because that's the question sometimes, is what are we not providing? And then your unit mix really is geared towards that. So obviously, if you're heavy on 1-bedroom apartments, you're not gonna have a lot of kids. If you have a 3-bedroom unit, you're probably going to have some kids in that unit. But as a general rule of thumb, we don't see a lot of kids living in apartments generally, but the school district really impacts that. If you're somewhere that has a good quality school district, like Brentwood does, there may be folks that want to move here and send their kids to schools, but there's just not options that they feel are attainable to them, and this would provide an opportunity. So I can't tell you exact number right now. That is something that we would work towards. And in the past, we've worked with firms like PGAV that'll actually help us kind of do that third-party disinterested opinion of what they would forecast. And we would share that with you. That is something we could provide when we work towards the final number. That's not an exercise we did for this, but that is something we could do.
I guess depending on what you build, you can steer it one way or the other. I think indeed there would be people who
Yeah, the
But
euphemism
I was
we
just kind
use.
of looking for some ballpark, I was kind of looking just for some ballpark ideas of potential highs or lows, if you have anything. If you don't, you don't.
So the way we generally talk about the concept is bookends. So we see a lot of young people and we see a lot of empty nesters that want to live in a community like this. Either you're new out of whatever higher education out of high school you've done, or you're a young professional and you want to live in an apartment, or you may be an empty nester, you don't want the house anymore, you don't want the yard to mess with, and this is a great option that has a pool and a fitness center and the amenities that you're looking for. I am not going to make up a number and throw it out there because I would just put my foot in my mouth later. So we'll absolutely put that estimate together and share that for the final report if that works.
So tell me about, I guess, two related things. The microbrewery, we have a lot of them, and in the St. Louis area, this is kind of a burgeoning thing, something that I'm very much in favor of, maybe more than I should be, but I guess I wonder, is this something that's going to peak and flow in and dwindle away? Do you have somebody in mind? Is it some brand new one or somebody that wants to locate, or how stable do you anticipate that really being over the next 10,
Sure.
20 years?
So I would tell you as an industry, microbreweries are big everywhere. St. Louis is a very bizarre microcosm because of Anheuser-Busch. So when InBev came in and bought AB, you had a lot of amazingly talented brewers left and created a lot of really just phenomenal microbrews.
Right.
You know, generally what we found is you sometimes have people that are really good at making beer but maybe aren't the best business people. And that's always the struggle, is picking really good partners. And what Green Street's done well in the past is partnering with folks that are really good at their thing, whatever it is, and helping them realize it. So we have talked to a couple of local microbreweries that are kind of in the region that are interested in this location. The other concept that people are now talking about a little bit more that doesn't really exist in St. Louis right now is a microbrewery, microdistillery kind of concept, which has been pretty popular in other cities where you may be brewing beer, but you might also be distilling spirits that, you know, is more of a cocktail base. Really the underpinnings of it, though, is the experience and the food that goes with it. You know, because you could brew great beer, and if it's not a welcoming environment, like on a gorgeous new park next to all these amenities, it may not do as good.
Could you expand a little bit more on your thoughts about the restaurants? I guess I would hope that we wouldn't end up with 3 or 4 more national chain restaurants or something like that. That's a personal prejudice of mine, but I was just kind of curious what, as practical matter, you would expect these to be.
Yep, I agree with your sentiment. I think that we have a lot of great talent in St. Louis, and we have really good relationships with a lot of local restaurateurs. And an area like this would be trampling each other to, you know, have the opportunity to be in the middle of a community like this. So what we're not is, you know, Walmart supercenter developers, you know, who have relationships with Chili's and put a Chili's in every parking lot we do. That's not what we are. We do a lot of things well. We don't do that. So, you know, if you're in our spot, we're looking at a very successful overall district that supports the entire concept of everything we're doing. So we want to be very careful and very intentional in those people that we're putting in all of these businesses. So that would be our intention.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks for serving the school board. It's thankless.
Alderman Gold.
Yeah, following up, and I think you started touching on a idea that was rattling in my head a little bit on as far as the microbrewery and just that whole anchor. I think you're absolutely right. Do you start to, you know, limit who wants to go there? And when you look at developments that are in some urban areas like Italy or whatever, where you have a collection of a lot of different options, but it's sort of run and managed by kind of a similar entity. You know, I think that would be really interesting to see if there's interest of multiple partners coming together, or is that usually one partner that does distilling, does winery, does,
Sure.
you know,
I'd say it depends. I mean, I think what we did at Olive and Oak and Webster is a really interesting example.
with Perennial?
Yeah. So Olive and Oak was obviously a very successful fine dining restaurant who had a relationship with Perennial, and they were able to come together, and you're now running a fine dining restaurant, a brew pub, an event hall, an actual scaled brewing operation all under one roof. You know, and those was a collaborative of just, you know, smart people really good at their thing, and, you know, we just really facilitated them being able to do it.
Yeah, and I think that the proximity to the park and playground and lake and, you know, I mean, anything that can be an area for families would
It's
be
huge.
interesting as well.
Huge.
Yeah.
It allows people to stay here and do everything they want to do without having
Right.
to go somewhere else.
May I jump in a minute with a couple of things that go to
Sure.
any number of things you all have said? The combo of microbrewery and distillery, we have, to my knowledge, one in St. Louis, which happens to be one of my favorite places, which is Square One in Lafayette Square. They're the only one that I'm aware of.
I believe that's true.
So there's, in my opinion, room for somebody else. Number two is one of the things about these people that they have, and I had no idea about this until we started having these conversations. They have a gentleman that is now part of their organization. And if you know about anything about what Cordish has done nationally with all of their developments, they are masters at finding the sponsor for the restaurant. Maker's Mark in Louisville, I forget what it's called. Maker's Mark has nothing to do with it other than planting their name on it, but tying them up with the local restaurateur who knew how to make that work. That's, to me, an awesome thing. And because we're the financial advisors, if you will, or watchdog maybe, to Ballpark Village for the city, we've seen how all of that stuff gets put together. So I think that's what kind of an idea you're looking at here, or at least what we've discussed with these folks. Lastly, we were approached by a developer. This was pre-Whitney, but Ebola knows about it. Lisa was here at the time that we met with, who basically wanted to come in, and they would have taken pretty much everything, not quite from Salem West, and built a product that is all of a sudden very popular. And we have seen it in the other major metros where we have clients, which is single-family rentals, and in their proposal, they were done like townhouses. Not small, not cheap, and to me, it was like, okay, now we're going to capitalize on putting that stuff over here next to the park, so somebody can rent those units for $3,000 a month and up. And we sent them packing politely because we didn't think that's what you had in mind here, and we didn't think that concept played into what we all worked on when you put together the concept plan. I suppose there's a place in here for something like that. We didn't. I mean, I don't know. If we made a mistake, correct us now. But we didn't think that was what you wanted to see.
Thank you. That was a great addition. I think that you've summarized that very well, Alderman Lackmiller.
Joel, when you get this many people concentrated in a small area, there's going to be security and crime issues. As a partner in this, I mean, are you open to partnering with the city on security and, you know, for example, maybe a police substation somewhere on the location? And
Sure, yeah. So I think that in general, the density that you see here is what we would believe is scaled pretty correctly. So what we don't want to do is create something that feels like people are on top of each other, right? That does not create a good experience. As part of the, blanking on the right word, part of what John B. would do, you know, kind of talking to every city agency when you analyze the plan of who needs what to facilitate this. What does the city not currently have? And part of that's police, part of that's fire, part of that's EMT. So all of those things are taken into account, and absolutely. So we partner with all of those agencies, and if they say this is what we believe, because I'm not a security expert. If they say this is what needs to happen to create a safe environment, then we're partners in that. You're absolutely right. The worst thing you can have happen is create something like this and have things like security issues where people don't want to live here, don't want to come here. That's would be terrible for us and you. So,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
I think one of the important things, and we've had you talk about it a couple times, is the idea of being the master developer, staying in the development, staying in the community, continuing ownership, management, that sort of thing. I think that'll help with a lot of these things as we go forward and continually kind of work through it. One of the other things that I like about the mix that's here from that standpoint is the day and night. Because you have people that are there during the day and you have people there during the night. It's not like it's all of a sudden going to be vacant at nighttime. Like if all you have is office and all you have is retail, I think that creates more opportunity for security issues than if you have multifamily, some of these single family, even with the hotel, because you've got people that are around, plus the entertainment aspect so that you have people there at night. So I like the mix for that reason. Before I go on, to kind of segue, did you have anything else you wanted to add, Joel?
But I would just say all of those people have a vested interest in the whole district being, somewhere where people want to go. So that really helps because then your operators are bought into, people aren't going to stay at the hotel if somebody puts on Yelp that they got mugged at the restaurant, right? So I agree.
And one of the things on the 55 plus, I love the questions about it. And I love that you guys are incorporating it. And I know I see, I'm going to call him out, John Nurnberger's in the audience soaking all this up. And he was on the planning commission with me at the time, I think, when we were trying to develop an ordinance to encourage senior family housing in Brentwood. And that was maybe, date myself, 20 years ago. We've never accomplished it. So, I mean, like goosebumps if we can accomplish that, seriously, because there's different things that are happening in our community, and you already are noticing that, and one of which is that our seniors don't have anywhere to go. And also having it be an area that's what I've heard you say, and you can tell me where I'm wrong related to the 55 plus, but your goal is not to have like high-end luxury. Like they can go to Clayton and have high-end luxury, but not all of our seniors can afford high-end luxury. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Joel.
No, that's true. Yes, I think that's correct. I think that what we develop is a Class A product that is some of the best product you'll see in the market. That's different than, what was just built at Clayton and Hanley, on that corner there. That's opulent. It's beautiful. I think like the Princess of the Queen of Dubai. Somebody lives there, it's like, right, you're like, that makes sense. It's gorgeous. It's as opulent as could be. That's not what we do. It's a very different product type. There's also, when you start talking about senior housing, there's a continuum of care. So this would be an independent living product versus memory care or something like that that really requires like a nursing staff. That's also a very different, very specific kind of development that requires coordination with state agencies and things like that. The other thing I would say that we're seeing communities have a problem with is if you don't create a relief valve for people to age in place in your community, they don't move. And if they don't move and they stay in their house forever, then you're jammed up, like, right? It doesn't create new housing inventory for new communities to move into. And that's why you have partly what we have now, where there's so few houses for sale anywhere because there's not options. The last thing I'd say is we're placemakers. So real estate developers, if you have a blank canvas, you can create what's going to go there. So I have a thesis, and I could be wrong about this, that, to your question, a lot of families don't live in apartments. I would argue that's partially because we stopped developing apartments that are really accommodating for families. So that project in Wisconsin and the one that we're doing in the Grove both have playgrounds. You don't see many developments that have playgrounds anymore. It's a natural playscape, like boulders and logs and things like that. It's not tubular steel and neon plastic, but it's to create a place for people. So there's some 3-bedroom units, there's more 2-bedroom units. So it's really just weighing those pieces correctly of really what needs to go there.
And what you said too about the seniors staying in place, you know, maybe they have a home that could be a starter home for young professional family. I mean, at some point, if you have an aging community and you don't have folks coming in that do have young families, and you end up with an issue on the other end for the school district where they don't have enough kids. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of look at that. So when you have that turnover, also, like I said, you know, young professionals, then they could have single-family homes, and the seniors wouldn't have to have the maintenance, so they would have that option of moving. And before I want to go into the workforce, since I mentioned schools, I noticed like Keith jumping out of his chair over there, so I'm gonna go to you.
It's just a small point. From my comments earlier, don't take it to mean that we don't want any kids to add to the school district.
No.
I think,
I didn't take that at all that way.
I guess you satisfied me that there's not a potential that there's going to be 1,000 new kids that we have to take. You know, I'm exaggerating. Having places that welcome additional kids would be a wonderful thing. You know, I don't think we're in danger of it being a huge number, but we can accommodate a substantial amount. And I think, you know, if you do think about it and put in playgrounds, and it's next to a park, you know, it could be a nice place for a small family to start out at. So,
That'd be wonderful.
So I just want to make sure I wasn't
I didn't take it that way at all.
sounding like an old curmudgeon, which
No.
I actually am. But
You're being a good steward.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I think you were saying you just want them off your lawn, is that?
no, I became a grandfather for the first time yesterday, and if I could convince them to move
Congrats.
back here, that would be great.
There
But
you go. Congratulations.
But they live somewhere else, and that's not going to happen. So anyway.
It's the benefit of having the one of the school board representatives on our 353 here. So, I mean, we are in the process of, we just did a lot of renovation to the high school and the middle school. We're building a brand new elementary school and then starting on the second one. So it is a practical matter that we have to
absolutely.
consider, because if we start to expand too much, then what we've just invested in is not enough, right?
Yeah, my wife's been a teacher at Hickson Middle School for 20 years, her 20th
There
year.
you go, yeah.
And they just did that huge addition to move 6th grade over there, so we love it.
So you know. I did have one more question as it relates to, you talked a little bit, I was pleased to hear you talk about approaching current businesses that are in there. Can you just give a philosophy on how you approach that, assemble property? Because obviously this is reworking a whole lot of how do you go about assembling different parcels, and then when you work with those existing businesses, do you give them, you know, a current rate that they have now as a benefit, or you know, or like all of a sudden increase it by 3 times for them that they can't afford to even be there? You know, speak to that.
A lot to unpack.
I know, I'm sorry. It's a big one.
Let me pull up a different PowerPoint really quick. So we actually have a specialist on our development team who they're a specialist in acquiring properties in large tracts like this. So I mean, it's a pretty specific skill set to thread the needle on correctly doing that, because you can do it really wrong. So having that core competency on our team is huge. So that person works closely with the individual property owners. Then obviously it's not just individual property owners, it's what the city owns, the county, all these different entities. Timing all of those things correctly, it's a very sensitive process to do correctly. So we have the in-house capabilities for like the day-to-day process of it. Then really it's as much as anything is working with you all and the city on how that process actually works. You know, to date, we've worked closely with PGAV on all of the work that's been done to this point to really understand what that fabric looks like. And it's generally pretty prescribed on how those purchases look. So obviously the different parties, it's not one answer for all of them, but it's fairly prescribed.
And you have had success at keeping businesses in these development areas that you've done?
You do your best to do that, absolutely. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it really does come back to community, which just sounds like kind of silly word salad, but it's really true, because that's what everybody is trying to find. Whether it's where you live, it's where you work, it's where you go to college, whatever you're trying to do, like that sense of community is what informs it. So when you have people in an area like this that are very invested in their community, I'll use RPM as an example because I've known Rudy for a very long time, right? He's part of the community. So you have something like that, that's important. If you restaurants, we had somebody really upset, like, oh, are you going to kick out the fly fishing guy? It's like, no, like, we want to work
We
with
are the
everybody.
mecca with 2 fly fishing shops in all of Midwest, so, you know.
So for us, it's a huge asset working with people that are really invested in their community. So anywhere we are, that's absolutely the goal, is to do that.
Great, okay.
It's different if you're a shopping center developer, which I did do that early in my career. And if you have your Sally's hair salon and your Chili's and your paycheck cashing place, like, right, you just blow everything out. You come in and you plug in your 10 guys that go in every shopping center. Not what we do.
Whitney?
I just wanted to have Joel talk a little more about the placemaking. There is a large component of public art in the proposal, and I didn't want him to, or have him leave that out.
And that's very important.
Yes.
Like, actually, it's part of the bigger concept and everything. Thank you,
Yes.
Whitney.
Would you like me to keep going on the presentation then? There's more slides, more
Oh,
pictures?
yeah.
I'm 5% through the slides, I'm sure.
We're
Okay.
excited. Can you tell we're excited?
So I'm going to go through this precedent imagery pretty quick, give you a flavor of what's here so you understand. Please do stop me, though, because sometimes we take for granted when we're talking about things. The point of this slide, these are buildings that we've developed in different uses. You work with some developers who have their 6 floor plans they use with their 6 types of facade, and it's just rinse and repeat, cookie cutter. These are all unique buildings that only exist in their current shape as you see them here. So different materials. The one in the top left is a local muralist did that in the Grove, because that's an important part of their fabric, is having a local muralist. It's not an easy word to say. The middle 2 bottom pictures that you see, the one with the pointy roofs and the one with the flat roofs, those are urban infill projects. So those are in the middle of a residential neighborhood with single-family homes. So doing something correctly scaled that fit in and looked right, really important. The top one shows an integration of first floor restaurant retail with apartments above it. Point to some of these is, and I'm not committing to doing this, but something that we would love to figure out how to do is mass timber. So in the top left, you see this building with all the wood structure, and kind of the large on the right middle here with the large wood structure. Mass timber is a way to do building now that uses less or no steel or concrete in the structure of the building. It's using mass timber, which is a renewable resource. It really hasn't happened in St. Louis yet. It's much more popular in the Northwest. It's popular in Canada. It takes local adoption from a building code. It's something we're trying to figure out how to do. The one office user we're talking to is interested in that concept, if we can integrate it. The point would be we're having the conversations and we're trying to figure it out. It's not the easiest path forward. It's probably not the cheapest path forward, but from the sustainability perspective, it's important. So we're trying. The bottom 2 pictures, are some of the destination entertainment things that the company that'll be in the Armory building is currently doing in St. Charles. Just kind of activating space and creating a sense of community for your tenants. Just some more precedent imagery of some of our multifamily spots. The community experience that we talked about means when you show up, it's not just where you park your car and walk into your apartment and live. There's spaces where you could have a chef come in and cook a birthday dinner for you and your friends. At our current apartment complexes, we work with local restaurants that come in and we'll do, Friday happy hour kind of buffets of food to expose tenants to other options. Pools, theaters, all the wonderful amenities that they did not have when I lived in an apartment. As Phil alluded to earlier, the Greenway is an important part of what we're doing in general. He was one of the first people with Steve Smith from the Lawrence Group that worked with Great Rivers on the new Greenway throughout the city. So he spent a lot of money, he spent a lot of time, he's been a great advocate for that. We love the fact that the trail will connect through, that it'll go into Maplewood, get to the Metrolink. So we believe that experience is really important. One of the reasons we did the concrete company site in Sheboygan was the city was buying 90 acres of railroad right-of-way to connect their greenway throughout their entire city to the county. So we actually did the largest TIF in the city's history, and a majority of that money actually went to support their greenway expansion. So partnering with the city to help them realize what they were trying to do. The public art on this slide is, I always say the name of it wrong. Can you say it? There you go. So they're a firm that's out of Montreal. What you see with the people on the swings aren't just like silly people on swings. This is a large art installation they've done that actually has traveled the entire globe now. So the swing set is musical. So as people swing on it, it makes different tones. And what they found is it really activates communities in a really active way. When they first said it, I thought it sounded kind of irritating. And then saw the videos of people doing it, I was like, oh, this is actually amazing. Like the way people are like stopping in busy places and doing these things is amazing. They showed us a couple of other examples of similar things they did in Dubai and in Arizona, where it looks like you're just in a big plaza, and it looks like there's little glass, like kind of inlays in the concrete. And they're actually photovoltaic cells. So when you put a shadow on them, it makes noise. So you have like dancers will go out there and dance in such a way that it makes like songs. Just really amazing ways to kind of activate. We actually brought them here from Montreal to meet with them and run through some of the other things that they've done to really understand how it's not just art that you don't touch in a community, which we've done at projects, you really pretty pieces, and you put a little sign that says don't touch. This is things for your community to interact with, where you could bring your kids here and they could climb on it and be part of it and really be inviting. So things like this are things that we work to integrate because it creates that full community experience. Yeah, so Chroma's down here on the left. Can I zoom in on that or will I mess it up, do you think? So this is in the Grove at on Manchester, where it used to be a Commerce Bank site. And what you see here with the chalk lines on the road was a city street that we were able to shut down with these bollards. And then the restaurants that are on the first floor here are able to come in and activate the streetscape. So you have people from the neighborhood who are able to come there, congregate. Yeah, there's just not a lot of open space like that in an urban setting, but it creates a space where, who did the concert last year? Julio or somebody like that? That's who I'm gonna believe it was. And I think that like 7,000 people showed up, like in this corridor right here. So just, it's placemaking. It's creating spaces for people to live in their community. Is that all you wanted me to say about that?
Down to the Grove for Grove Fest. And for the benefit of those who couldn't hear because it wasn't on the microphone for the recording, essentially it's this Grove Fest, and that area is the main stage where the grass is, and this allows for them to have flexibility to do festivals and gatherings and things like that. Great.
That was a very good synopsis. So I think the point is, we're real estate developers, right? We can go develop this building all day long, right? That's what a lot of developers do. What a lot of developers don't do is create the space around it to create something that's good for not just our residents that live inside this building and pay rent, but it's a destination place for others in the neighborhood. I think that's my last slide. It is. See, there you go. That's a lot of information.
Now,
you guys had really good questions.
each one of like the 7 people on your team is going to get up and talk for 15 minutes each now, right?
No, that's right, yes.
Okay.
They
Did
have questions
everybody
for
pack
you,
a
actually.
snack for later or bring your blankets?
You need water or anything? That was impressive.
There'll be no water for you. I'm just kidding.
Chairwoman Bilderbeck, there's a,
Yep.
there's a question, a chat online says, amazing job on the project with all the addition of this great structure. Is it possible to widen Manchester, at least add a turn lane? So I wanted that to be presented.
Yeah, Manchester really isn't under our purview. Unfortunately, we don't have control over that. It's another big gorilla entity, and we don't get to do that. Do you want to add something about?
It's interesting. I had a phone conversation with Tom Blair, who I'm sure you know is MoDOT's director for the region. And in the conversation, a Manchester Road was mentioned. And I said, well, we are very likely to have a development project that will be starting up. And I reminded him that there were prior conversations about a signal at Salem. and he said, oh, well, we should have that conversation now since we'll be going under construction. So, for whatever that's worth.
So there'll be a lot of conversations that the city and the developer will have with all of the agencies of all of the infrastructure for this entire area. So, I mean, even though we don't have the final say, like on what MoDOT does, there'll be a lot of conversations. And I know you guys, I'm sure, are adept at doing that.
My purpose was to remind him that one of his people said that was okay previously.
I was also corrected. It was Busta Rhymes, not Coolio, for the record. So my apologies to Mr. Rhymes.
One of my favorites.
And by the way, that's who was at the Grove in the nice placemaking area where they had the concert that isn't exactly necessarily what we're going to do right here, so don't panic. Alderman Gould.
Yeah, I did want to follow up on the Manchester Road comment, and I do think it's one thing maybe that, correct me if I'm wrong, John, that we did talk about a lot about a redevelopment, and the reason that we wanted the 10-foot sidewalks and the curb cuts to allow for traffic to get off of Manchester quickly and not pulled into a parking spot, right? So the way that we're designing, or the way that you're envisioning designing this, would allow traffic patterns to get off of Manchester in and out of that quickly, so that we don't have backups in it. And is that correct in the assumption that frontage property allowing for cars to get off of the road and park in the background of it?
That's true.
Okay.
And what you're seeing on here between the buildings, what's on the south side of Manchester, the buildings immediately on Manchester, and then kind of the secondary buildings offset between them, that roadway would have likely angled parking, which allows you to kind of maximize the on-street parking opposed to parallel parking.
Also, the zoning code requires that Salem entry to be wider. I forget what the requirements are, so that as people are driving down Manchester, they have a view into the area and the trail and parkland, the green space behind it. It's required in the zoning code.
Yes, go ahead.
I have another question. So the, as this as the plan is phased out or phased in, I guess, can you speak a little bit to maybe what percentage of these, at least in the first phase, you have kind of maybe already potential, tenants or people to be there lined out, and then as you go through the process and we get down the road and closer to the next phases where things are sort of fleshing out, how much of that, I guess how much of that is you're building a space and hoping people fill it, and how much of it is, maybe every building is sort of purpose built, I guess, to, you have a tenant or whatever, you have a user already set up, and it's like, they're in the process, involved in the process. And then, sorry, this is a multi-layered question. And then so if that is the case, or to the extent that it is, how much is we or the city potentially, still involved in sort of, weighing in, I guess, on those, who's going to be going in there, and maybe changes that might need to happen to accommodate that.
So what I would envision, I'll try to answer that together as one thing, I think. So I believe what would happen if we're chosen as the developer, we move forward to the city, you'd have an approved development plan, which is the more refined version of this, which shows you what can and cannot be built. You know, within the development agreement or the final ordinance would lay out, this is the total amount of square footage of these uses, or these are the total units. So you may lose 5 units here and add 5 units there, but you know kind of the bookends of what you're getting. So you would know that. The reality, though, is on day one, when we're working on the microbrew at this end, we're not, you know, having an architect build full construction drawings for J at the other end that might not start construction for 3 years. So every building and everything you do goes through the whole city process. So every single thing goes through the same process that any other new construction project would. So your architecture review board, planning, zoning, the council. So that process happens. So you have 100 bites at the apple as this thing progresses over time. So what we want to do is we want to lay out for you, this is what we believe can happen. But say, for instance, that both of those office users worked out. And we knew that the one at this end was faster than the other, so we got that approved and we did it. And then we came back to you in a year and we said, we have another office user that's really interested in being here. You know, we would have to go through that process with you to say, okay, we're gonna switch out G for another office building. And that would require amending those processes. So and it's not like when we get to August, you've chosen us, just like we close the doors and develop the project. For the apartment buildings themselves, we own and operate those. So if you assume, just say it would take you 12 to 18 months to lease up one of these apartment buildings, just for the sake of argument, that's faster than it would take to build another one. So, I mean, if you just kind of go down the logical, if you built the first apartment building and whatever feedback we get, we'd modify that for the next one if we needed to. I don't anticipate that that would be the case, and then you would just kind of go down the road with that. And I think it's the same thing for the others. So the office building, you wouldn't build a speculative office building here. It would be purpose-built for a user. The hotel, we've already had those conversations with our hotel partner, and there's a high level of interest in doing that. So when you get to the smaller users, it can become a little bit more speculative. But I don't think we'd have that here. I think we'll have the user base that's interested that you'd sign up so that you're building exactly what they want.
Did a good job of answering all those questions. So the mixed commercial, I guess it was a D and G. Are those the ones that are supposed to be the mixed commercial use?
So those are the two-story buildings that the programming is a little more flexible on those. I think from our standpoint, what was important is getting the massing of the building correct. So the height, the setbacks, the square footage, making sure we could park that use. You know, I loved what Jeff said earlier that, you know, what if, could you have a co-working space concept in the development? That's a great use for a building like that. You know, it's accessible, you can cut it up in a way that makes sense.
But would those be, you know, it's strictly kind of limited to, you know, those office kind of uses, or would potentially be, you know, first floor is retail or anything, and then you've got resident or office?
So that was one of the concepts that we discussed. You know, there's a notion of work-live units where people, you know, have a business on the first floor and live on the second floor. This is a great example of where that can actually work. So that was one of the concepts that we discussed.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And just for everyone's benefit, to kind of reiterate, I've had the honor and privilege to serve on the Planning Commission for a long time, working on a lot of these developments. Literally every single building, every single parking lot, every single tree, every single everything that's anywhere on this property is going to be gone over at meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And in fact, sometimes we met weekly with developers as a planning commission, weekly for several months, because these projects are so big. And that's part of what we did to work with the developers as well, and also to be sure that we're representing the community interest and having that partnership and meeting the timelines that they need and trying to be expeditious as well. So it's a mutual thing, but there's going to be plenty of opportunity. So I want to go ahead and kind of, I mean, we've had you up here quizzing you for a really long time, Joel. And we'll get to citizen comments later in the agenda. And if maybe you stick around for a little while in case there might be a question you could answer. But I think if anyone else on the board or the staff doesn't have any questions, we may move to the next step, and Whitney, I don't know if you want to do it under item C or under B, like the consideration for us if we want to have Green Street take the next step of the very expensive process on their end of putting together a final proposal.
So that is part of, if you review my staff memo under B, we are looking for a motion. We do recommend that you have a discussion with Green Street on how long they feel like they needed to indicate, to provide that final RFP. They've indicated 30 days if they need a little longer.
Yeah, I think our question would be, can it be written in such a way that, could we request 60 days, and if we finish early, we could submit it earlier?
We certainly can, yeah.
Yeah,
do
I think
that.
our team would like to kind of digest the feedback and kind of really understand what our next steps are.
And we've given a lot of feedback, so I think it would probably be a good idea because they'll be able to have more time to address it if they need it. That way they wouldn't be locked in to the 30 days.
So so if they want 60 days, that would be part of the motion that is needed is to have Green Street Real Estate Ventures further refine their proposal for a final submission, as discussed at tonight's meeting, to be due at approximately 60 days.
Alderman Gold?
Yeah, I'll make that motion. Motion to recommend Green Street Real Estate Ventures to further refine their proposal for final submission based on the comments received by the commission within a 60-day period.
Second.
Roll call vote. I think it would be prudent given the nature of the 353 Development Corporation.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Tony Ponder? Burkemper?
Yes.
Gravenberg?
The motion unanimously
Motion
passes.
carries.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, congratulations on so making it to the next step, and thank you. We know you guys have a lot of work to do that goes into this, and we really appreciate it. I do want to say one last thing as well, which is that love hearing all of that you said with the testing of the marketplace, and we know you can only go into so much information as we go along at sensitivities and whatnot. But that's great and encouraging because the more testing of the marketplace there is, the more we won't have a complete change. We do have a story in Planning and Zoning Commission history about the European village that changed into a big box like in 1995 or something like that. So we really appreciate you guys being conservative, the approach you've taken, and the testing of the marketplace and all of that, which is some comfort level as to the plans. Everything changes as we go forward, and it's a partnership, but that the concept is there, if you will. So just thank you. Whitney, do you want to take us on to the final request for proposal response?
Yes, so as the final request, as the request for proposal that is on the city's website was open-ended, we would work during the interim, or quickly, actually, to issue the final with a specific end date to be roughly 60 days. And therefore, we need a motion to have the city draft that and put it out on the website with the final end date in case there are other people who might be interested.
Alderman Plufka?
I have a question as to why the end for the RFP has to coincide with their revised design. You said in your background you wanted 30 days. I don't know why you're looking for 60 now.
Well, that was what they just requested. We just indicated sometimes it's 30 days, but that was to be a discussion with the applicant, and they indicated they would like to digest the discussion tonight and had requested 60 days.
I think
Well,
that
then I'm
I
totally
think the
misunderstanding
difference.
this then,
Yeah,
because-
I think I can answer that,
Okay.
Alderman Plufka, and you all can tell me where I'm wrong. But it's a global thing. We can't just have this period just be for this developer. So that's why they have to set a global final request for proposals that would be for everyone, and then it would be the same. Does that help?
Sort of, except that I don't understand why they have to be the same date. I still don't understand that. But if you're telling me it has to be, then that's fine. But I understood C to be our end date for other developers to come in and make a proposal.
Right.
Why can't we make that deadline sooner than 60 days? Is there a reason we can't do that?
You can.
I mean, is it just a sense of fairness? I mean,
It's just a sense of keeping it open for the same time period for all potential applicants in case somebody, it's unlikely that somebody's going to come up with a new plan.
So as Joel suggested, if he comes back in 45 days, can we stop it at 45 days then? Or we're still
Well-
open for another 15, I guess?
If you look further down the agenda, the next item is you gotta schedule your next meeting.
Yeah.
And I would recommend you consider it to be after 60 days from today. So
Sure.
that it gives them time and you have a certain date we're all working towards. So it's probably not worth,
I'll make the motion that we
Thinking about-
alter our current RFP to have a close date of not longer than June 27th of 2022.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Tony Ponder,
Yes.
Andy Burkemper,
Yes.
Keith Ravenberg. Motion carries by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other business, next meeting date?
I would, we have an end date for 60 days, June 27th, but you would want, that's when they're due. So we would want a couple of weeks to disseminate the information. You have time to review it. So I wouldn't schedule the meeting too close to that date. I would give yourself some time just to review it. So the week after would be the week of July 4th. I don't know if we want
No,
to go
Probably not.
too soon.
what about today is a Tuesday, right? What about the
Yes.
12th of July?
We can look at that.
Sustainability Commission is on that date.
oh, not that you need me there for that, but I will not be in town that day. I'm in town Thursday and Friday that week, though, and the following week.
What about the 14th?
There is a Public Works Committee meeting that night.
Was incorrect, the sustainability, it's a
Yeah,
subject.
no,
It's not,
there's
so
a
the-
Ward 1 meeting, but not, yeah. Alderman Plufka can probably modify that.
So on the 12th then? Is that, what about you guys?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if our team decides though that we could deliver this in earlier than 60 days, is there a way to modify that? What you're putting in place, can you build some flexibility into that?
No, because it's going to have to be put out there for other folks to look at too. So
And so then logistically, if somebody else did submit a preliminary plan in 30 days, how would you analyze that if we're spending lots of money to come up with a final plan? that's
we
due
would
in-
probably take it up at the meeting with your plan as well.
It kind of gives us a little bit of a lack of certainty for an RFP that's been open for 6 months.
Understood.
So going back to your point, can we close it earlier?
That was not to put too fine a point on it. That was kind of my point.
I mean, I guess my question would be, why can't you set a 30-day time window for anybody else to respond and a 60-day window for us to turn in our final response?
They can do that. They've already
That would
voted to
give
do the
us more
60
comfort
days.
for what we're endeavoring on here.
If that's what the board would like to do, they would need to,
Resend.
somebody who voted in the majority would have to make a motion to reconsider the previously adopted date. Vote on that and then vote on a new date after a motion and second for that new date.
Sorry for being difficult.
No worries.
I will make that motion of asking the board to, or the commission to reconsider the previous adopted end date, to consider it be 30 days instead of 60.
Second, is there a second?
I'll second.
been moved and seconded.
You can probably just do a voice vote on that, I think.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye, yes.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Now you want to make a motion for the new end period, a second, and a vote on that.
Alderman Plufka?
Well, I have sort of have a question. So when my approach to this, when I saw this on the agenda, was that what you just said a second ago, it's been open for 6 months, and it's been open, and I realized that part of that time we were, it was, you know, there was uncertainty with regard to COVID, but that's certainly, that time seems to have passed, at least to some extent. I don't know that there's anything magical about 30 days either. I just was curious as to whether or not you're more comfortable with the prospect of the amount of money you're gonna be spending on a refined proposal. Is 30 days any?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is if somebody's out there putting together a plan for you, I would imagine that you'd know that because they'd be in conversation with PJV, and it would be very hard for somebody to put together a complete proposal in 30 days. I don't know. I think it's important for you guys to have the correct optics with your community and with the population.
And let's be clear, there's nothing that prohibits us from if this doesn't work out in the next few months, that we will issue another RFP.
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
it, you know, there's no time limit or limit on how many times we can do that. With that in mind, I'll make a motion to close, that we amend our open-ended RFP to be closing to receive new proposals not later than May 27th, 2022?
Maybe just the end of May, that'd be a little easier.
Say the
Last
end
day of May,
The last
Mike.
day of May.
Yeah.
All right, May 30th, that's fine.
31st.
There is, oh, there's the 31st, I guess there is, yeah.
Second that.
We have to schedule our date next. We still have to do this first, I think.
I believe they're saying they can probably get it done by May 31st. Is that correct, Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so we'd close submissions by 31st, and then we'd schedule a follow-up meeting for this board, say 10 to 15 days after that date.
But then they aren't getting the benefit of their full 60 days.
They just said they don't need
No,
the
I'm sorry.
full.
There's 3 points of time. You're going to close the RFP on the end of May. We get 60 days, so we turn in our final proposal, and then however long you guys need from that to having your next meeting
You want 60 days from today, roughly?
from today.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you said you could do it by the 31st.
I'm sorry. I was just confused.
Right. Right. So, yeah, the motion was already giving them 60 days. We amended the motion under item C for 30 days. So then the next item is just scheduling the meeting.
But we haven't actually voted on it.
Oh, sorry, you have to actually vote.
I think you had
Okay.
Alderman Plufka had moved to do that,
I
and
second.
Alderman Gould seconded, I believe. Unless there's discussion.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Tony Condra.
Yes.
Andy Burkemper.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 6-0.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to scheduling our next meeting date again. So,
I think we were looking at July 12th was the
Yes.
last date thrown out?
yes,
I'm unable to attend that meeting.
can everyone else attend?
I can't be here, but somebody else can be from my firm.
Okay.
I'm out the whole week for vacation.
And which date is that?
July 12th?
Tuesday.
I think that. Yeah, that works for me.
Do you need to check with Phil?
Yeah, do you need to schedule it now as part of?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I don't know that we can get a hold of him. He's in another meeting. So
Okay.
let's just schedule for July 12th then.
Okay,
We'll make it work.
okay, cool.
We can always reconsider
All right,
it.
July 12th at 6 PM. And if something comes up and we need to change it, and apologies for your, yeah. Okay, good. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to citizen comments, and Joel will let you sit down. And we sure appreciate you guys being here and everybody coming. Okay, so if anyone from the community or in attendance would like to get up, come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and share any brief comments or questions. And same with the online folks, they can, I think, send that in via the chat.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Brian Hanson. I live in Brentwood here on Joseph Avenue. I just had, I guess, a couple of questions here
And
for you.
if you'd address the questions
Yep.
to the chair,
Oh.
and then we'll see if
Sure.
that's something we can have them answered tonight or not.
Sure. So I guess my first question is this plan that they're gonna provide for us, does that give them sole development rights for private property that's already currently owned on North of Manchester? So gas station, RPM and that. Is this gonna firm those landowners or property owners to have to work with them to sell their properties in part of this redevelopment? Or is the agreement only going to be for tax-owned liability land currently owned from the city of Brentwood during the purchase of all the floodplain? So just for example, if I decide I want to buy RPM and put a restaurant in there in that spot, do I have to deal with them or do I deal with the RPM owner if we go with this agreement? So for their development. So that's one question I had. The other comment I had, which nobody talked about here tonight, was the fact that how the city participation is going to work in this current plan. And currently, they are asking basically that the city of Brentwood gives them all the current land that we have purchased. And I say we as as the owners of the Brentwood and taxpayers. It is asking here under the city participation that we gift them that property. Mm-hmm. In 2019, we raised our taxes so that we could buy that property as part of this floodplain. We now assume those taxes and insurance liability during the project. We're going to then gift them this property without even possibly taking it to a fair market value to even see what sort of value we're going to offer them for this property that we're going to gift to them. I think it's wrong that we are going to assume, or that there's any sort of contingency in there that we gift land to them in this development related to, stuff that's currently owned, and then the use of eminent domain as well. I know a lot of this is not residential, so forcing out commercial is a little different than residential, but the fact that there's any sort of community development here that we're already paying for this huge project to then go and have to give that hands away again, it's like a double hole paying out of the pocket. So that's really all my comments.
Oops. Thank you very much. I think maybe our attorney might want to say a few words about it.
Yes, so assuming that Green Street submits a revised response and the board meets in July, that will just be a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen has final say, and the Board of Aldermen will, if they entertain that proposal, the Board of Aldermen then will negotiate with the developer with respect to those issues, whether or not incentives will be offered, whether or not any kind of donation of city-owned property will be offered. Those are all going to be decisions of the board and the redevelopment agreement in connection with the Green Street proposal. So none of that's been decided, none of it's been committed. The city tonight or even in July, nothing is committing the city to donate property, to give incentives, or to use eminent domain.
And then I just want to reiterate too, just for the benefit of the public, not everyone here even, but on the recording, that the developer is not asking for eminent domain related to single-family development, and nor has this board considered that through the process. So just to put that out there. Does anyone else in the audience or online have any comments or questions to submit?
No one online.
No one online? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we'll close the citizen comments for tonight. And barring anything else for the good of the cause, Whitney? Good. Good? Okay. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.